Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for coming to my presentation. The story of Agua is about a society that started as a small group of people who were dissatisfied with the governance and common law of the city they lived in. Activities like child sacrifice, war, commodifying citizens into slavery, and overall greed from city leaders were the cause of their oppression. The group then decided to flee the city in search of refuge. On their way to freedom, they have an encounter with a mysterious deity who gives them a detailed account of how he will rescue them from their oppression. That deity revealed himself as Agua Viva, which is Spanish for living water. The character Agua Viva is heavily based on Jesus Christ, who often refers to himself as the living water in the New Testament. The objective of this project is to dig deeper into classical cultural evolutionism by analyzing how Christian theology is still relevant in today's society. I also aim to challenge a specific mental framework under classical cultural evolutionism suggested by anthropologist James Fraser. Fraser suggested that the use of magic was practiced before Christianity, and when magic failed, magicians would rely on monotheistic practices to pray to a supreme God that could interfere with nature on their behalf. This may be true for Christianity, but I would argue that theology came before magic, and magic was secondary only when monotheistic or polytheistic practices fell short. As someone who grew up in a low socioeconomic status family, I have struggled with mental health issues, identity, self-worth, purpose, and witnessed a lack of resources and opportunity due to systemic oppression. As a result, I looked to Christianity for answers. What sparked my interest in this topic and where I began my research was the Holy Bible. I examined biblical principles and applied them to personal and world issues. As a result of this application, I noticed a positive change in my personal life and a better understanding of how to implement change in my community. In addition, I studied the work of multiple theological scholars, including George T. Montague, who is a Catholic priest and professor of theology at St. Mary's University, and W.R. Ingay, who was a professor of divinity at Cambridge. I used classical cultural evolutionism to analyze how biblical principles can be incorporated into secular society. This method is one of the earliest theories known in the field of anthropology. It's the idea that just like biology, culture evolves over time. A major contributor to this theory is E.B. Tyler, who argued that culture does not degenerate as Christian theology suggests, but rather it progresses. What I found is that even though culture has evolved over time and made some remarkable progress, it has also demonstrated a decline. Some of these cultural declinations include capitalism, imperialism, and utilitarianism. The city I created for my project has characteristics of all three of these behaviors. To analyze the decline of culture throughout history, I considered the theory of political economy. Political economy considers how a local community is being affected and influenced by global capitalism. I use these characteristics to show how the Christian God addresses these types of issues and provides sanctuary without forcing people into bondage. Now, here is an excerpt from my project. Agua has many names, but the way he revealed himself to the people during the time of the Occidental oppression had been as the living water, Agua Viva. But the people simply called him Agua. The living water flows from the depths of his innermost being. Anyone who drinks this living water shall never thirst again. Not in the physical sense alone, but their spirit will be like a spring gushing forth inside of them. The power that lies within the water is that of eternity. This infinite power can only be harnessed by those who are found worthy to carry it. Still, it is sought after by some of the most powerful beings in the universe, but available to the lowliest of men. There had been a war in the heavens for the power of Agua Viva. Legions of sprites mobilized under the direction of the Dark Ones to overthrow Agua's throne and possess his power. but it was to no avail. The leader of the Dark Ones had been sentenced to live the rest of his days on Earth, and his army followed. Chaos quickly ensued over humanity as the Dark Ones began working to gain control over the Earth. They knew that the power of the living water was available to humanity and did not want them to possess it. Conquering nation after nation, the Dark Ones and the Sprites had been unstoppable. The Dark ruled quickly expanded throughout the earth and reached the people of the West. They had conquered Asia and Europe and had their sights on the Western people. The Sprites had been in collusion with the governing officials of the Western region to weaken their unity and power. The Dark Ones deceived the people into thinking that the spirits of Olympia would help them innovate a path toward a better future. But the spirits were really a part of the dark rule, and instead, ruin awaited them. The Olympic spirits made the people believe that they could live any way they wanted without consequences. People did whatever pleased them, even if it negatively affected others. Officials and secretaries were making secret deals with the Olympic spirit named Hermes for the expansion of territory and trade. An alliance was formed between the West and the European Union. Banks were established and royal edicts were set in motion for the embargo on other regions. They began stealing from each other and lying to cover it up. Fighting started to break out among citizens, which often ended in death. The worship of these false gods had led them to a desolate place. The state of this Western society was rapidly deteriorating. As greed for power and resources swept over the city, people began to put their hope in more gods. Moloch was the god the people chose to trust during the city's decline. They were in great need of shelter and sustenance. Each harvest produced dead crops and their food supply was dwindling. Government officials were claiming the property of citizens for official use only and putting people out on the street. This led to the beginning of child sacrifice in order to appease Moloch. The cries of the innocent filled their town. A group of citizens initiated secret meetings near a riverbed in the forest to plot their escape. There were about 100 of them that consisted of men, women, and children. When they first started meeting, they would all cry and mourn for their city. Many of them had lost family members and homes. The hurt and pain they felt were like heavy bricks stacking on top of them, smothering the life from their bodies. Loud sobbing filled the forest and sent vibrations through the trees. These vibrations touched the birds who nested in the woods, and they flew toward the sky carrying a song of mourning to heaven. The people were desperate for the restoration of their city and held deep angst within their hearts. One day, they were all gathering to meet for a final time before fleeing the city. They were putting together all they had left of food and resources to plan their survival. The clanking of pots and knives being thrown in a communal circle was the only sound heard. A few of the women were walking toward the river to gather water for the trip. An unexpected gurgling sound from the river startled them. It sounded like the river was boiling. The women looked at each other in confusion and persisted toward the river. Suddenly, the water from the river was glowing. It appeared to be an electric blue hue that was glowing like a bioluminescent phenomenon. The women's eyes grew large as they approached the glow. They continued walking toward it slowly, stopping before they got too close. One woman was brave enough to step close enough to peer down into the river to see if she could find the cause of the luminescent glow. She stood there watching as another one of the women called out to her, "What is it?" The woman didn't reply and stood there silently watching the water. "What do you see?" the woman called out again. The water was churning in a vortex motion like a whirlpool. Bits of shiny objects were dancing around like diamonds that were dropped on the ground. Splash! The woman jumped into the river.
In the end, I have learned that one cannot make an analysis that challenges the beliefs or practices of another without exhibiting even the slightest amount of ethnocentrism. I would argue that it may be necessary in some cases to carry an ethnocentric approach when the situation involves local and global oppression. Through creating this project, I realized that being a Christian is about holding true to your beliefs in a society that rejects them. And for this reason, Christian culture could appear to be ethnocentric in many cases. However, the reason that Christian theology and the Bible remain relevant today could be due to the motif of love that is interwoven throughout Scripture. If we consider what the Bible defines as love, we can see that these characteristics are strong enough to combat opposing forces such as deception, greed, control, and indifference in society. I hope to receive constructive feedback about my novella from Christians and non-Christians to see what they liked and didn't like about the story, as well as see if the story resonated with them by answering any questions they have about Christianity, or if the story enticed them to want to know more. And here's my bibliography with all the sources that I use for data collection and analysis. And finally, I would like to thank my faculty mentor, Dr. Derek Fay, for mentoring me and helping me through this journey to completing my project. Thank you so much for all of your time, expertise, and support, Dr. Fay. I also want to thank Dr. Jess Whalen, who encouraged me to join honors at the community college I attended, which allowed me to have the courage to join university honors at UCR. And next, I would like to thank the University Honors Department for cultivating a community of scholars and providing resources to help all honor students thrive. And lastly, I want to thank my friends and family for their encouragement and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Briana. Wonderful.